as of now, this session is being recorded so that we can post it to our website so that you can watch it back and go through everything again if you want a refresher, or for anybody who wasn't able to attend at this time. So if you don't want to be recorded, you can go ahead and turn off your video, turn off your microphone, and you don't have to be actually recorded in this session. I'm Lauren, and I, along with Ryan, Nate, and Nicole, are hosting this session. We are from Teaching and Learning with Technology, and more specifically, Media Commons. And so I'm just going to help get everybody started and ready to go before I pass it off to the actual Lightroom learning and functioning. So I will go to the iPad, and Lightroom CC is available on all or most mobile devices and also desktop. And the desktop app actually does work with the mobile app. You can go back and forth between the two and they kind of sync together. Oh, you guys don't need to see that. So here is the Lightroom interface, and I've already gone too far. You guys can stay, well, no, you can't. So we're gonna download a picture. So we're all working with the same picture. So on your device, go to whichever browser is your favorite. And I'm already on the right page, but, and let me put it in the chat because I'm gonna say it fast. That's just how I talk. You're gonna go to bit.ly, so bit.ly/PSU boat photo, and it's PSU boat photo because there was already a bit.ly/boat photo. Anyway, I digress. bit.ly. Oh no. You can tell that I'm traditionally an Android user and I'm not that familiar with using the Apple keyboard. There we go. And that should take you to the page I was already on. And to download this image, you can just click on the little ellipsis under the lower right corner of the photo. That should pop up a menu, and then you're going to want to click download. And this might act a little bit differently depending on what device or interface that you're on. If it prompts you to download, of course, click download, and it should go somewhere. And then we're going to work on finding that for you. All right, so now I'm going to go back to Lightroom. And you will need to log in if you're not already. So I didn't want to, hold on. Sorry, I'm going back and forth a lot. So to log in, you're just going to click, you know what, I don't know exactly where it is. I don't want to log out because then you guys are going to see me put in my password to get back in. So just when you click log in, I'll let you guys find that. And I'm going to demonstrate it in a different Adobe mobile app. You're going to see this screen, this sign-in screen, and put in your Penn State email address. And you do need your ABC123 version. If you've got an alias, that's not going to work. And then if you get the select an account, I think that if you don't have a personal account associated with your Penn State address, you don't see this screen at all. But if you do see the screen, pick company or school account. And then you would, of course, follow accordingly. So that's the part that I don't want everyone to see. So I'll give everyone a little bit to get logged in. Oops, sorry. Thank you, Ryan, for posting an actual link for anybody who is on desktop. Okay, so if anyone's struggling with that, well, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about the camera that's built into here, so you can go ahead and keep working on getting logged in. So this is the main Lightroom interface. Also, if you have already had Lightroom installed, it might have prompted you to update it. So some people might be working through that. But this is the most recent version as of yesterday, actually. And the Add a Photo button is the blue one in the lower left corner. And again, buttons and labels may be in different places depending on your device. So looking at that blue button, it will be blue no matter which device you're on. We're gonna first look at the camera button. So there's two buttons here, and I'm gonna click the right one of those two buttons, and that pulls up the camera. And we have a couple of options that you can go through here. So it has the camera that's built into the app. So you can take photos with your phone's regular camera and import them. That's basically what we're gonna do today, because we have a downloaded photo. But you can take photos directly in Lightroom if you know you're going to want to possibly, probably use Lightroom with them. And if not, they do, when you take photos through here, it does go to your camera roll, I think. So in addition to other things looking different depending on what device you're using, every version of Lightroom, and depending on the device you're on, will have different settings. So this device has the most settings because it's a new iPad Pro. So I want to draw your attention to the lower left corner where it currently says Auto. And when I click on Auto, I can pick from Automatic, Professional, or High Dynamic Range, also known as HDR. And I'm just going to switch it to Professional. So you may have a different set or less or more, well, not more, but you may have less professional settings here, but you will have some professional settings. Every device has that option. And you can play around with these settings. And if you are interested in learning more about those like the pro settings for basically manual settings, you can change any of these to manual basically. If I change it, then it's no longer in auto. If I take it down to auto, it'll just be auto. Yeah, you can play around with those settings and kind of learn how a camera works. And if you're interested in potentially investing in a DSLR, all of that knowledge will translate. You just then have to figure out how to do those settings on your particular DSLR camera. So another thing I want to point out is at the top, if you see something that says JPEG, that means that you can click on it, I think. At least on my other device, I don't have it, and that means I can't click on it and I can't change it. But if you can click on it and you see the option for DNG and then switch the slider, DNG is Adobe's RAW format of photo. And what a RAW photo is, that format just allows you to take a photo with more information. So what it the short version of what that does for you is, with the darkest darks and the whitest whites that normally are just blown out and you can't get any information back if you're working in JPEG, you're going to be able to pull photo content out of those levels of color or not color when you're shooting in RAW. So it just allows you some more freedom and flexibility and ability to create, especially with low light. That's going to help you out a lot. So just a little bit about the camera. Of course, we're not going to be working with that today, so we're just going to click the X in the upper left corner of the screen, which might be different for you. All right, so by now, hopefully everybody has gotten their app reinstalled and their photo download and logged into the app. So now we're going to use the other button on that little blue, like kind of pill-shaped thing at the bottom there, and we're going to click the Import Image button. So that's the sort of landscape photo with the plus. So go ahead and click the plus. And then if you're on Android, it may, for mine at least, it just pulls up my photos folders or my downloads folders. For iOS, it's going to prompt you to pick from some of these options. So you might try camera roll. If you don't see it there, you can just close out of it, go back to import, and then from files, you can see that I already had this downloaded yesterday. So that's why it was in both places. And then click on it there. So depending on your settings in your browser, it might go to different places, but I most reliably found it in the From Files option. On Android, my phone defaulted to sorting images by time, and then the photo was at the top. And, but you could also potentially click where it says time and go to, if you don't see it there, and go to device folders, and then it would probably be in your downloads. At least for mine, again, I'm not 100% sure if that is a browser setting or phone setting or just a brand of phone setting, but hopefully everybody has found it. Sorry, I'm just catching up on what's going on in the chat. Okay, I think Brian's helping Brandon get sorted out. So I will keep going. All right, so I'll make sure I have that imported. And then, well, it told me I had already imported it. So I'm not seeing it at the top of my all photos because it's sorting by the date a photo was taken, which was actually a while back. So the easiest way for me to find that is then by clicking on the recently added, and then it's going to be right at the top because I just added it today. Click into it, and then that takes you into all of the edit settings. Again, this will look different for you depending on which device you're in, or even if the orientation of your device, it'll be similar, but depending on where you're looking, but that should get you all where you need to be. And then I am going to hand it off to Ryan, who's going to get you started with working with this image.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Give me a second here to share my screen. I will be doing this from my iPhone, so my interface will look a little different than Lauren's, who is doing it from an iPad. So give me 1 second. Okay, so we should all see the image of the boat here. So here's a great thing, and I think we're demonstrating this through what Lauren has shown through her iPad and what I'm about to show through my iPhone, is that maybe more so than any other Adobe app, Lightroom is one of their most flexible apps. And so there are multiple versions of Lightroom out there. We're using the most current recent version, Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom CC, now sometimes called Adobe Photoshop Lightroom. This is different from Lightroom Classic, which has a completely different interface. But the version that we're using can be found on iPhones, iPads, Android devices, as Lauren mentioned. There's a desktop app that you can download through your Penn State Adobe Creative Cloud account, but it's also available through lightroom.adobe.com. And so there are so many different ways to interact with Lightroom, and if your photos are saved into Creative Cloud, you can access them from any one of those apps as well. So that's a great thing to be able to access your Lightroom photo album from practically anywhere. So what I'm going to demonstrate is some of the first things that I do with a photo whenever I have taken the photo, whether it's on my phone or I've imported it from my DSLR camera, and start making some adjustments. All the adjustments that I'm making are in the frame of what kind of story do I want to tell with this image? What kind of emotions do I want my audience to feel when they look at this image? And how do I best emphasize those qualities through the editing choices that I make? And so before we get into anything to do with exposure or adjusting color or emphasizing certain features, which is something my colleague Nate will go over, first, I take a look at how I'm going to set up my image, right? So that means making decisions about the crop or what parts of the image I leave in or I adjust sort of the edges. I take a look at the horizon, and in this particular image, while the boat looks straight, we can see that the curvature of the mountains on the horizon is at an angle. So maybe the camera was slightly tilted when this picture was taken. I'm going to look at geometry, and I'm going to look at adjusting certain optical discrepancies that might be introduced depending on the lens that I'm using. So I'm going to go ahead and move through these options. As Lauren mentioned, your interface may look a little different. It looks like the iPad doesn't always label the buttons quite like the iPhone does, but I believe that the icons should be the same. So just take a look at the icons before I click on them. So to start, I'm going to begin going into the crop menu. So when I click on crop, I'll get a window that looks like this. This is where I can make a few different adjustments. The major one that I want to focus on right now in this window is adjusting that horizon line so it's more flat and straight across. Now the crop tool accomplishes this by actually essentially cutting out kind of the edges of the image, right? And removing parts of those photos. So you want to make sure that through your adjustments, you're not removing anything that you later want as part of your photo. In this case, I'm going to touch that little radial dial at the bottom of the image to just kind of make simple adjustments. Now Lightroom helpfully adds some grid lines to this image so that I can try to line it up on that shared grid line going across the mountaintops and try to land it so that that looks pretty straight to me, like that. Now you can see the edges, the grayed out portions of the photo outside of the rectangular box. When I hit the check mark in the bottom right, they're going to be removed, right? So I can always hit undo and I can always go back into crop and make adjustments. But the parts of the photo that are grayed out will no longer be a part of my image. It's important to note here, although we're not going to use this, that this is where you can also change the aspect ratio. So if anybody here is an Instagram user, you'll know that kind of the classic default aspect ratio of Instagram is the 1:1 square. So if I click on aspect ratio, if I knew that Instagram was my final destination for this photo, it's where I was going to publish it to my audience, I might go ahead and start working in the 1:1 square to begin with, knowing that that's what my canvas size is. So I want to make choices that emphasize that canvas size. The nice thing is you don't necessarily have to make that choice now. If you might be publishing it to a variety of different locations, Instagram allows you to adjust the aspect ratio later. So that's usually what I would do, is wait and make that choice later and leave it in its native aspect ratio. So I would actually, to get it back, I would hit the undo button, which is in the top right-hand corner. That sort of U-turn arrow at the top will go ahead and just undo the choice that I made right there. So at this point in time, I'll go ahead and double check that my mountains and horizon are still good. I like the way that looks. I don't want to do anything like change the story that focuses only on the boat. If I drag the edges of this rectangle, it's actually shrinking the image, kind of like it's zooming in. And then I could say, yeah, the boat is totally my centerpiece. That's what I want to focus on. But if I did that, I cut out all the other environmental surroundings, right? And so my focus is on that image of the boat. And depending on the resolution of your original image, the more you crop and zoom in, the less resolution you have to work with, and it may start looking grainy and pixelated after a while. This image is in the raw format that Adobe has, DNG file, and so we have a lot of room to work here, but I actually want to keep most of my environment in this image. So I'm going to back up a couple of times. And actually, if I feel like I've gone too far, I can go all the way back there and then readjust my image in that way. And then I'm pretty close to where I was. Make an adjustment there. So I want to go ahead and lock that in at this time. So I go ahead and hit the check mark in the bottom right. Now, there's another way to make adjustments. So this is particularly useful if you've shot photos within a city and you have buildings and the buildings maybe look like they're coming in at awkward angles. You can go into the geometry option within Lightroom here at the bottom, represented by a series of grid lines. And in here, Lightroom does a pretty good job of auto leveling images. So I would usually start with that. Now I know from practice that it does not do much with this image, so I'm not going to touch it. But if you did have straight lines, like in terms of the edges of a building, or a much clearer horizon line, it would automatically adjust that so that they were straight relative to each other. But if you wanted to make specific adjustments here, you can adjust distortion, right, which sort of creates a fisheye or a reverse fisheye effect on your image if you need to compensate for some sort of lens distortion. And you can also mess with vertical and horizontal settings to make further adjustments. The great thing about Lightroom is that it makes it easy to, if you've made an adjustment that you end up not liking, to go back and recreate that from the beginning, so that it's really easy to kind of play with the options here. Now this is another way that I could have straightened out my mountains, right? So this is the rotation feature, and I can make some adjustments there. It's really no different than what we achieved with crop. So now my image is pretty close to where I want to start working. The last thing that I do, there's not much to this, is going into optics, making sure that enable lens correction is on. Usually that's on by default. All this does is Lightroom looks at the metadata of your image to know what kind of lens and camera it was taken with. And using that profile, it automatically applies an optical correction to correct for any sort of lens distortions within that profile. And remove chromatic aberration does just that. It smooths out some of the distortions that could be a part of the way that the picture was taken. So now at this point, you're ready to actually make choices that add a little more story, a little more emotion, and a little more life to your photo. And for that, I will kick it over to Nate.
Thanks, Ryan. Let me share my screen here real quick. Okay, so once this gets going, I'm going to pull up Lightroom so I can be on the same page as everyone else. And there's my picture. Are we all seeing that? Awesome. Okay, so as Ryan said, you know, we can have a lot of fun with, you know, really altering this picture. But again, we want to try to tell a story with the picture. We didn't take the picture, so we can really create our own story around it or invoke certain emotions through the picture. So the way it was taken right now, I mean, we're seeing nice blues in the picture, nice grays in the water, and then we're seeing some really dark spots. And this is an awesome picture the way it was taken, but the cool thing about Lightroom is that we can really emphasize certain parts of this picture. And so when I first see this picture, I'm really attracted to the wood that's exposed in the boat. And so when I am approaching editing this picture, I want to really make that wood be the kind of the eye, the thing that drags my eye to the picture. And again is in sort of in that third of the picture. So if you've ever heard of the rule of thirds, that's also an area where our eyes are naturally drawn to. So I'm just going to emphasize that. And so that's kind of my goal in editing this picture. I want to emphasize the wood, maybe you turn it a little, get the golden hues to come out to contrast the blues in the picture. And so that's my goal. So let's see if we can get there. So the first thing that I like to do after doing the geometry or after cropping is to go into the presets or the profile. And so I'm going to go over here to profile where the red dot is, and I'm going to go to browse. Again, this is where you can initially start your edit, but you'll have several different options here. As we go about editing this, please feel free to follow everything that I do, or, you know, choose your own path, create your own adventure, and at the end we'll all share and see the edits that we've come up with. But I'm going to go over to modern. I'm going to click modern, and it's going to bring up several different profiles that I'm going to use. And you can scroll through them, you can click, and you'll notice that it's kind of like an Instagram filter. It's going to change as you go. And you can kind of pick one that looks good. I like 6. I like modern 6. I also like modern 10. So I'm going to stay with modern 6 right now. Again, feel free to use any profile that you want. In the bottom of my screen, there's a little toggle here where you can move back and forth. And you'll notice that this is going to change, I guess, the opacity of that filter. And you'll notice in the top of my screen, that number up here is going up or down. And that's how you'll know if you're, you know, adding or subtracting from that profile. So I'm just going to keep it right around the middle just because that's easy. So the other thing you're going to want to do is when you do an edit, usually there's a little done button in the bottom corner. You're going to want to make sure you click that done button so that you can continue the edit. If you get stuck, it's probably because you didn't click that little done button. And then once you do that, you can continue. So I'm going to get back out of the profile, and I'm going to just go down the line. It says light for me, so I'm going to click light, and here you're going to see exposure, contrast, highlights, and so forth. And this is where the best way to learn what each thing does is actually just taking that slider and go to the extremes, right? So if we add the exposure, it's going to brighten that picture. If we lower it, it's going to darken it. So here we're going to really be able to play around with that. It doesn't look too bad. I don't want to overexpose it because you'll lose some of that texture, but we can always get it back later. That's the cool thing with Lightroom is there's a lot to play around with. So just play around with those sliders a little bit until you see something that looks cool. So I'm just gonna move these around. Again, I'm trying to keep in mind my goals for the end of this. So as I do this, my goals might change because that's the cool part. But I'm gonna continue just moving these sliders. I like the way that looks. And when I'm done with that, I can just click out a light and I can go straight down to color. And again, I'm gonna do the same things. Use the extremes. You know, see what it does when you raise the temperature of the picture. See what happens when you cool it down. So again, you can use little incremental changes, but it will make all the difference in the picture. So I'm gonna go there. Again, for the tint, we can play around. I don't wanna go too far. Vibrance, I like that. Saturation, that's going to bring out some of those warm colors. So again, some of the stuff that we're doing now might negate sort of that profile that we started with, but oh well. I mean, we can play around and we'll see what we come up with. Again, you can go down to effects and texture. Again, do the extremes, see what happens. I like to play around with texture because you can kind of make this look, if I drop the texture all the way down, you can almost make it look like it's a foggy day, or it was very humid, or it looks almost like a watercolor. And if that's the vibe you're going for in this image, that's awesome. But I'm not gonna go for that. I'm gonna actually raise it a tiny bit so that that texture in that boat really pops out. So here's a great time to kind of explain how you can navigate through this picture. If you use your two fingers, I'm using a pencil, but if you use your two fingers, you can zoom in on a picture, and that's how you can move that picture around. So as you'll notice, if I add texture in this effects, you'll actually see more of a difference when I zoom in with the texture. Yeah. So you can do that with the clarity as well. Again, play around with it. The cool part about the clarity and the textures, you can really see a big difference in the ripples of the lake. I'll show you real quick. So if you look on the screen, you can see the little ripples of the lake. If I move that down, those almost go away. If I move it up, they become really vivid. So we again want to just play around to see what we like. Again, the dehaze, that's going to make it look a little more vivid. I like how it punches out the blues in the top of that boat. You'll also notice that as I dehaze, look on my screen on the clouds. If I put that back down to 0, it should, unless it was something else. Might have been something else. Maybe it's the textures. If I move the textures down and the clarity down, the clouds should start to pop out, which is exactly what happened. Throughout the process, if you want to continue to see what your initial picture looked like, you can actually just push on the screen with your finger, and it will revert back to the original picture. And as soon as you take that off, you can sort of see your edits. So I like the way that's looking. And now I want to focus more on that wood in the middle of that boat. And this is a cool thing with Lightroom, and that is you can specifically edit certain areas. So on the right side of my screen, you have several different options, right where my indicator is. And I'm looking for the option right below the Band-Aid. I always say it kind of looks like a trampoline, but it's actually the selective edit tool. So I'm going to click that, and it's going to bring up a blue plus sign. So somewhere on your screen, depending on what device you're using, you're going to want to click that blue plus, and then you have 3 different options. You can use the paintbrush to kind of indicate the area that you're editing. I'm going to use the circle because that seems we can create an oval around the boat or around the area we want to edit. So I'm going to just touch the screen, and I'm going to elongate that circle to about the size of the boat, and then touch it on the side like that, and continue to expand it until it reaches sort of the area of the boat. You can move that selective edit area with the blue icon, blue circle in the middle, and there should be this red kind of haze. That's the area that we're going to be doing the selective edit with. So when we have that area, which is the boat, you'll notice that up here it says selective edits, and this is all of these icons or all of these tools that we have will be just for that certain area. So if we go into light, again, we're going to have the same tools that we had for the whole picture, just for this area. So I'm going to boost that exposure. You'll notice right away that the exposure of the boat, the lighting of the boat is going to get a little brighter, and I want to focus on that boat. So I'm going to add a little more light to that area of the boat. Again, we'll play with the sliders. We'll see what we like. Drop the contrast a little. Boost the highlights. Get rid of some of the shadows. I like that. So I like the way it's turning out right now. I'm going to then go on to color. And this is the neat part where we can really make this, this wood kind of stand out. So under temperature, if I raise that temperature, you notice the color of that wood just starts to turn green. I don't want it too green. I want to keep it golden, so I'm just going to raise it a tiny bit just to give it a little more warmth. And you can play with the tint. Again, I'm going to do it the same with the saturation. As I raise the saturation, the color of the wood is going to continue to keep its golden brown in it. And again, I want it to sort of contrast that upper parts of the blue over here. Okay. Again, you can play with the effects, detail, and optics, but I like the way it's turned out right there. So again, I'm done with this edit, so I'm going to have to click done. Otherwise, you won't be able to get back to your other editing options. So that's a cool start, a neat start. I think I want to do a little bit more though. So I'm going to go back to that selective edit, and I'm going to click plus, and I'm going to do the circle again. And this time I want to edit the beach. So I'm going to just click on the beach area and expand that circle. Again, tilt it. You can expand it outside of the image, it's okay. And I'm gonna just move that onto the beach. And for this, I just wanted to add a little bit more light. So I'm just gonna go to light and just push the exposure up a tiny bit. And again, you'll notice that the beach now has a little more light, and you can actually define and actually see some of the rocks and sand. Again, we're focusing, or at least in this picture, I'm focusing on this line that draws your eye, the light that comes through the sort of this part of the picture. And so right here, I wanted a little more light to keep that line of light coming through. We can emphasize that again with another selective edit. And we can just take another look at what we started with and where we are. I like it. We can do another selective edit. Again, people have different workflows. The way I work could be vastly different. So, you know, feel free to continue to do what you want for this image. All right. I just want to put this here. What I want to bring out here is maybe that line of light through the water to, again, continue to drive our attention to this part of the picture. And I'm just going to actually boost the exposure there a tiny bit as well. It's kind of the subtleties of the picture that make it really amazing, and all the cool things we can do with Lightroom. So I like the way that looks. Again, I'm going to click done, and awesome. So that's a great start to the picture. You really notice that you can see that line of light that we created to emphasize the wood. So let's look back to the beginning. Cool. The neat part, and you can look at this, is that look at the clouds on my screen, and the clouds, you can sort of see them there. But as soon as we do those edits or raise the texture or lower the contrast or up the contrast, you can actually see the details in the clouds, which is really, really neat part of Lightroom, especially when you're shooting in a raw format. You're able to get those details from the picture. So one last thing that I want to do real quick is to show you the power of Lightroom and its healing tools. So I'm going to zoom in, again, use 2 fingers and pinch, and zoom in to a spot on the screen that I want to eliminate. So on the right side of my screen, right here, I'm going to go back to these tools. I want to click the Band-Aid, and that's just called the healing brush. So this is where you would access the cloning and the healing. And if it says clone, just click heal. Cloning is, again, another way that you could heal a space, basically taking another space and overlaying it on top, which is what we're doing here. But I'm going to go to size, and I'm going to lower the size of my brush, which is the red dot in the center of the screen, to just above the size of the blemish on the screen that I want to edit. So I found that, and I'm just going to click on the screen. You'll notice that Lightroom is going to find another spot in the picture that's very similar, and it's going to basically just paste it over top. So it eliminated that dot. I'm going to click done, and as we zoom out, again, it was a really small thing, but it's gone. We can't even tell that it was there. I'll do it one more time. Over here, there's another dot over here. Again, I'm going to go to the Band-Aid, the healing brush. I'm going to use lower the size of that brush to just above the size of the blemish. I'm going to find that spot. There's one. Cool. And then we click done, and we've just taken those out. Again, the larger the item that you're trying to erase from your picture, it's going to have a little more difficult finding the same texture, colors, or image to place over top. So I'm very happy with this picture. Just one thing that I want to show you guys before we finish this little edit, and this isn't another edit, but this is actually something that I just noticed a couple days ago in looking at this picture, is that if you zoom in, there's birds in the middle of this picture. And this is something you could eliminate if you wanted, but I think it's a really cool little secret of the picture that you have to spend some time with to see. So at this point, I'm happy with this picture. I would post it on Instagram if I wanted, but I'm going to send this over to Nicole to show you guys how you can sort of keep all the work that you've done with the preset option. So Nicole.
Nate, could you show the before and after again real quick, now that you've done all the editing?
Sure.
I always think that's like a cool feature of Lightroom.
Yeah, so when I click on the screen, that's the before. You can see it on the top of my screen. It says before and after. That's pretty vast. That's pretty neat.
It can sometimes feel like when you're editing that you're making really small changes or very incremental changes, but when you go back and look at it as a whole, you can see exactly what you did and how vastly it changes the image.
Yeah, but it really does start with the image taken, and I believe, Nicole, you took this image?
I did, yes. I took it on a
Excellent.
trip to Ireland. It's from County Donegal, near Slieve Leagues.
Wow. All right, I'll stop sharing here real quick, and we can get you going.
Yep, and let me share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Yep, all right, great. So I followed the same exact steps that Nate laid out, and I came up with something that has a different feel. It tells a little bit of a different story. I was going for a more dreamy feel, almost like we were walking in a fairy tale. So it's pretty incredible that you can run through the same editing steps and come up with something that has such a different feel to it and really tells a different story. And again, I'll show off the before and after of the editing because it's super fun to do. Woo. You have to make that noise when you do it though. Woo. So what I'm going to do is show you how to save your own preset. We used a preset at the very beginning, and I thought it would be cool and interesting and useful to be able to save your own presets. So if you go up to the right-hand corner, upper right-hand corner, the 3 dots, and select that, and then you'll just select Create Preset. And then it allows you to assign a name to it. So I'm going to call my preset Floaty. And I can also create a folder to hold a group of different presets and together to be organized. So I'm going to call that, I'm going to select the under the preset group user presets, and I'm going to create a new preset group. And I'm going to call it Ireland. And done. And under the select options, these are all of the different places where we've made some edits, all the different categories where we've done some editing. And by default, Lightroom will select certain certain attributes to save as your preset. So you can see by default, optics, geometry, and tools are not saved. So I'm going to leave those the way they are. And I like everything else about this picture. I want to include all of these attributes in my preset. So I'm gonna leave those check marked, but you're more than welcome to uncheck or check whichever attributes you'd like. You can even go in and uncheck specific attributes like exposure, contrast. So I'm gonna go back though, and I'm just gonna keep those presets that are laid out for me. And then I'm just gonna select the check mark to save that preset. So saving a preset like this is really nice, and it's a really efficient way to work with multiple photos. So let's say I took several photos from this lake and I wanted them all to have the same effect. So I can easily just assign that preset to all of the photos in that group. So I'll just go ahead and show you how that works. It's very similar to what we did at the beginning. So my next photo here is a photo of a peony. So to select my preset I just created, we're gonna go over to the right-hand, almost upper right-hand corner. There are two circles that are overlapping each other. And there are all the presets that are available. And if I scroll down, I see my Ireland photos listed. And there is my preset that I called floaty. So it doesn't really exactly fit this photo, but this does give it the same kind of feel as my boat photo. And so if I'm compiling a series of photos together, maybe a string of 10 or so for Instagram, for example, and I want them to all have the same feel, I'm using them all to tell to tell a story, to provide cohesiveness between photos. This is a really nice way to do that. So I'm gonna select done, and then you can see if I go back and forth, they both have that dreamy kind of otherworldly feel to them. All right, so what I'd like to do is I'm going to quickly export this. I'll show you how to export your photo so that you can use it however you'd like. I'm going to go ahead and post it to my social media. So we're going to go up to the top right corner again, the export button, which is the box with the arrow pointing up. And then I'm going to export it to my camera roll. And it'll just take a moment for the photo to render and save. And then you'll have a message below. It says one photo successfully exported. So I'm gonna leave Lightroom for a second and go over to Instagram. Sideways. And I'm just gonna quickly add it to my post. And so when you're in Instagram, if you're familiar, you can move, it automatically applies that 1-to-1 ratio that Ryan was talking about earlier. And then you can move your photo around until it's just where you want it to be. And so if all of you would be willing to share the photos that you've edited and created, we'd love to see them. If you're willing to do so, if you could post your photo on social media with hashtag PSU Creates, we'll be able to find you and your work. Cool. And otherwise, feel free to turn your screens on and you could share your mobile device to your webcam over Zoom if you'd like to show your work off that way. And then one other thing, I'm gonna jump back over before we wrap up. I'm gonna jump back into Lightroom. I just wanted to show you where Adobe Lightroom has some really great tutorials available for other types of editing. So if you go back to if you in the left-hand corner your arrow back to get back to this home page. And then at the top, there's a light bulb, and you click on that. There are all kinds of really cool photo editing tutorials right baked within the app. They're a lot of fun. You could really lose some time in these. They're pretty amazing. So if anybody would like to share their photo in the Zoom session here, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Maybe, yes. And if anybody is willing,
I'll hold mine up.
let's see.
If I can find my photos, there we go. And I Instagrammed it too.
Oh, nice. I like, Dan, I love how you're green. You popped your green out.
And look what he did with the sky.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
We're trying to make it like a sunset.
Yeah,
So,
it's
Yeah,
exactly.
that's like a sunset.
It's exactly
That's
what I was gonna
awesome.
say.
yeah, I did a lot of select editing on the skyline in particular.
Yeah. I wanted to bring out the blue in the sky, and then I realized it didn't really match like the sky that was reflecting in the pond or the lake, because I brought out a lot of saturation in that. So that was a little bit of a, it was like, oh, I can't go back. I tried to go back and fix it, and I couldn't really. Not without a lot of undos.
Michelle, are you sharing your screen with us?
Sorry, yes, I was. Did I do it? It's a blank screen.
It's a black screen right now.
Why did that? How
Are
come
you sure? What kind of device are you sharing from?
iPad Pro.
So if you select share and then screen and then you have to select broadcast.
Oh,
That should work.
it doesn't have, wait, screen and then broadcast?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have that.
There's a chance that maybe your Zoom app would need to be updated. We ran into this for one of the Penn State Creates that we had to postpone. There was an issue with a change in Zoom.
I think it's a 5.01. Because I looked at it last week. I think on Monday it was supposed to update.
Well, if that doesn't work, you're always welcome to hold it up to your webcam camera if you'd like.
Yeah.
And you can take a look at it that way.
Trace, I saw yours for a millisecond. It looked like you zoomed in. Oh, cool. That's a cool perspective. I like how you played up the rock.
Yeah, I decided to really zoom in on this one and kind of look for some other stuff in there, especially like those birds that Nate had mentioned. I found those when we were testing it and was like, oh, I wonder what else is hiding in here.
All right, well, we thank you all for joining us. We had a lot of fun working on this Penn State Creates session for you, and we hope to offer more really cool and interesting sessions in the future. In fact, next Wednesday, the date is the 23rd at 3 o'clock, we'll be hosting a epic Zoom video creation session. So we hope to see all of you back for that. And thank you for attending.
Thanks, everybody.